Hello there, and welcome back to Kerbal Space Program New Zealand Reborn. Here we are in orbit of Lathe in the Jool system with our Tumwaki 2 probe, which has unfortunately suffered a fatal communications dish error, and we are forced to lose contact with it because it is unrecoverable and there's no way to fix it being so far out from Kerbin. But back at the Space Center, we have a couple new astronauts that we have on the payroll, and we do need to train these astronauts to be able to do their mission functions as well as possible. So we are going to bring them on a flight on one of our shuttles, the Zeta. And this mission is going to have them land on the moon and then do a flyby Minmus. And all told, it should give these crew members a lot of experience. Obviously, bringing a couple tourists along the way, just so that we get a little bit of extra money from their very well-lined pockets. In any case, Badiah is able to set the Zeta down onto the lunar surface, and he orients it facing the equatorial 90 degrees so that it's easier to take off, and he plants a flag. And then the other astronauts, which are Orrin Hayes, Ward Herman, and Linda Clark, who is our first astronaut from the UK, all get out to take a group picture so that we have something to publish back home, of course. And then Jebediah takes the helm again and lifts off from the lunar surface in a very routine sort of flight, because he has, in fact, been to the Mun several times before now. Doing a quick jaunt to Minmus and then back to Kerbin, re-entering the atmosphere to hopefully land safely back down onto the surface of the planet. Well then, turning our gaze outwards away from the Kerbin system, we come to our Dres Explorer 1 mission, which we launched some time ago, and it has finally arrived at Dres's sphere of influence. So, getting ourselves into an orbit using our cryo-cooled hydrogen engine, I believe this is, we get ourselves into a high orbit for one of our contracts to release the high orbiter that can collect us a bunch of science from a very high orbit of Dres. And we decouple it here and have it drift away, docking the other two halves so that they can get the other science from the other areas we need, including a low orbit, heading to the periapsis to burn and slow down our speed. Dres is obviously very small, so we don't need a lot of delta V to do much around it. And once the low orbiter is detached, we get ready to send the lander down. The first landing doesn't exactly go super smoothly, but the gravity is actually low enough that we're able to still take off from a sideways position. So this lander is able to take seismic data, temperature measurements, radiation scans, etc. And we are hopping around on the surface to get it from all of the various biomes, but it'll still be here when we get back to Dres in the future. Coming back to the Kellington Space Center, our new pilot Orrin Hayes has been trained to do Mooner and Minmus flights on the NZSA Zeta, and so he's being tasked with his first tourist mission to get us some more funds for the Space Center. And we roll out the Zeta to the pad. This is going to be its 5th launch ever. Hopefully able to complete the mission successfully. Unfortunately, of no fault of his own, the left booster decides to do a little trolling. By some miracle, the entire crew survives this incident, but the NZSA Zeta is completely totaled. So we have to produce another shuttle. Thankfully, we had one in backup for emergencies, the NZSS Avenger. And this one is more than capable of completing the same mission profiles as the Zeta and Orrin Hayes. Although a little bit shaken from that incident, they're all in perfect health, so we send them off to the moons anyway. It is never more than 1 or 2 days to get to the Mun, and our new pilot Orrin Hayes is able to set down the Avenger gently onto the surface of the Mun, alongside his co-pilot Leonardo Tillman. In addition to this being a tourist mission, we are also bringing along Tillman for his first ever flight in a training exercise. And the two of them get out to plant a flag and get a couple pictures before Hayes takes the controls again, and landing in a crater this time, there is a nice, if slightly precarious, ramp leading out of the crater edge that we can use to get our trajectory high enough to lift off from the Mun. And our re-entry goes fairly smooth as well. While re-entering, actually, it's very hard to get control of this, but I've sort of learned over time the trick is to keep it centered on a vertical axis. We almost are able to land on the same side of the mountains as the Kellington Space Center, but it is not quite that easy. So he decides to land a little ways off in the mountainous terrain. At the R&D center, our scientists in the nuclear sector have been very hard at work, and we are able to advance our current stage of nuclear engines and nuclear reactors, which we are definitely going to need for the future of our long-sustained flights. And of course, our next mission is going to be very expensive, so what do you know? We're launching another shuttle, this time piloted by Orrin Hayes once again. And he is going to min-miss this time with 7 tourists in his shuttle. Now, with over 6 million funds and still some science trickling in from Dres, we go ahead and grab some extra technology for bigger fuel tanks, which means we are now ready to launch our next Jool mission. Tumaki 1 and 2 were not able to complete their missions entirely successfully. Tumaki 3, that was never actually launched. It was just in the design phase and it was scrapped. So we are launching Tumaki 4. And this is going to be an orbital assembly mission, our first ever.
T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition and liftoff.
The roll program is in progress. Vehicle body rates look good. Booster PU has gone to fixed angle, surely confirmed. SRB chamber pressures have plateaued. Gun rolling off. Signatures look good. RD-180 operation looks excellent at this point in the flight.
With two Milwaukee 4 on the way testing our new orbital assembly capabilities, it should arrive at Jool in just under 2 years. Until then, we can barely keep Jebediah away from the pilot's seat at any given occasion, so we are sending him back out to pilot the Avenger on its third expedition, this time going to Minmus. It's landing on quite a steep slope, and so you can see there it is sliding off away from Jeb while he is posing for his pictures before heading back to Kerbin there and bringing in for a nice soft landing back on the surface. However successful the latest Avenger mission may have gone, there is startling news from Mon orbit. It is reported that micrometeorites struck Edoras Station late in 1982, causing critical damage to many of the station's system, including depressurization in one of the central modules, leaving astronauts Edward Medhurst and Trace Weber Jr. cut off from the rest of the station. The return capsule to bring the astronauts back to Kerbin was unharmed, but only astronauts Antony Kazmarczyk of Poland and Gene Seeley of South Africa were able to make it there. Edward Medhurst and Trace Weber Jr. sacrificed themselves to make sure that Antony and Gene made it off of the station alive. The nation is saddened with the news of the death of two more astronauts, the first time that New Zealand has lost two astronauts on a single mission. Poland and South Africa are both commissioning monuments in Medhurst's and Weber's honor, given that they sacrificed themselves to save the astronauts of those two nations. And our station construction capabilities have been called into question given the fatalities sustained on Edoras Station. However, on the surface of the Mun, efforts on expanding New Auckland have been continuing for some time, and the crew on the surface, currently commanded by Svetlana Angelica, have been very hard at work preparing the colony for a new arrival of crew members. So, taking these 8 Kerbals, our brave astronauts, to the Mun, they know that exploration is a task not for the faint of heart, and they land next to the colony of New Auckland. It has been upgraded severely with the new, basically self-sustaining capabilities of the colony. We are able to build massive domes and even more greenhouse facilities, and the colony can now support 8 Kerbals easily on the surface, and it is more streamlined and a lot less laggy than it was before. But that's sort of the thing we're going on with there now. So Svetlana Angelica takes the controls of the Avenger and guides it off of the surface of the Mun. This crew being one short, however, sort of a poetic reminder to the 2 astronauts we lost recently. Sophia Adams died not even 2 years ago yet, but they are able to make it to the surface of Kerbin relatively unscathed in their shuttle. And our future missions on the Mun are still under development, and given the dangerous connotations that Edoras Station now has, a new concept for building stations has been devised. Instead of launching a bunch of modules separately, the space agency is going to try to construct these in as little launches as possible, and needing to test out some new habitation technologies for our upcoming Duna mission, we launch the Medhurst station, named after, of course, Edward Medhurst. And this one is going to have its very own gravity ring. So that's going to spin and provide gravity for the crew members. And the castle booster is actually so good performing, it can launch so much mass that we're able to increase the amount of life support that we are bringing to the Mun. And that, in fact, allows it to be quite flexible, actually. So while they're doing science, if we need to bring in extra crew to Medhurst Station or extend the duration of the mission, that is something we can do. So while we let that crew work on the Mun, we must turn our gaze back to the Red Planet, which unfortunately, the last missions that we sent there, the rover built by New Zealand failed in a little bit of an awkward moment, but the United Kingdom and Poland are more than happy to help us construct another rover since their last missions to Duna were successful. And this is going to head to the Red Planet. This mission profile, you've seen a lot of this kind of stuff before. So, skipping most of the mission here, we land on the surface of Duna successfully this time, and the rover is able to drive around collecting science that we need to decide where to put our base on when we send crew to Duna in the next couple years. Now, Rongo 1, which we sent to Sarnis, is very nearly there, and it's going to orbit Tecto for a while, collecting science there, just adjusting the maneuver here so we can head in. Sarnis, weirdly, when you first view it, either on the map screen or in flight, it creates a decent amount of lag, but hopefully that's not going to become too much of an issue in the future. So Rongo 1 arrives at Tecto and burns its nuclear engine for a quite a long burn, I think. I believe it was 7 or 8 minutes, but it gets into a low orbit where it can collect the science that it needs to make this mission a complete success. Heading away from Sarnis here, back to the Space Center very briefly, Tumuaki 4 is on its approach to Jool, and this, our largest, most complex, but hopefully our most successful mission, promises to deliver tons and tons of science to our space program.